Okay, it's 7:02, and I'll call this meeting to the order of the Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Commission. Could we have a roll call?
Bill Brown.
Here.
Annie Adams. Leonardo Covis.
Here.
Kara Dudek.
Here.
Cynthia Hoyle.
Here.
Audrey Ishii.
Here.
Susan Jones.
Present.
Jeff Marino.
Here.
Craig Schonkweiler with Brad Bennett.
as proxy for Craig Schonkweiler.
Thank you. Nancy Westcott. Lily Wilcock.
Here.
Seeing a
Yes, the name would have been.
quorum is present, could we have a motion for approval of agenda?
I'd like to add,
Oh, sure, yeah.
we have a little update on the BPAC survey and then a little discussion on the University Avenue study.
Okay, BPAC survey, University Avenue.
That's what I was looking for it on there.
Maybe it could probably be under unfinished business.
Mm-hmm.
That's where it was last time.
Okay. So I'd entertain a motion to approve the agenda with those additions.
I move to approve the agenda with those additions.
I second
that.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
The agenda is approved. So we had some minutes sent to us for the last meeting. Did everybody get a chance to look through those? Any corrections? If not, is there a motion to approve?
I make a motion to approve the minutes.
I'll second that.
Moved by Cynthia and seconded by Jeff. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. That motion carries. The minutes are approved. We don't seem to have any public for public input. Unless Brad, did you want to have any public input, or you want to wait to be official input?
I'll wait for the unfinished.
Okay. Okay, next is unfinished business. Pedestrian master plan update. Brad Bennett.
Well, I
Or-
mean, I'll defer, you talk about doing an update
One-
on the survey, you wanna?
We could do those first.
And then I can launch into the, because it might be a little bit of a longer presentation.
Okay. So on the BPAC survey, what did you have in, did you want to do an update, or who?
Audrey asked.
Well, personally, I'd rather hear Brad's first, because it might lead into discussing things about the BPAC survey.
Okay. So this will be the pedestrian master plan update.
Thank you for having me this evening. I'll start out actually before we jump into the master plan update with just a couple updates on various other things we've been working on. Craig gave me some information to share with you this evening. So on the Bradley Avenue bike lanes, there was an email that was sent out early, but they've been installed. So if you have an opportunity, go check them out. He notes there are a few minor items like a couple of no parking signs and reinstallation of a right lane merge sign, which was hit over the weekend, that still need to be addressed, but otherwise the project is finished. Yeah. So, well, yeah, the right lane merge sign, it doesn't say where it was located. Yeah. A ribbon cutting ceremony will be held at a later date. Community development is going to take the lead in setting up the ribbon cutting event for the kind of the official unveiling of the Bradley Avenue bike lanes. 2017 pavement marking project. Most of the lane striping has been installed. There's still some puppy tracks at the intersections and a lot of bike sharrow and symbols that still need to be installed. Varsity Striping is the one that's doing that work, so you might have seen them around town, but they're still continuing to wrap stuff up. They've got a lot done, and just a little bit to finish up. And then bicycle wayfinding plan. The first meeting of the steering committee is scheduled for August 23rd. The makeup of the steering committee consists of representatives from the City of Urbana, BPAC, Urbana Park District, University of Illinois, CU MTD, Champaign County Bikes, Urbana Business Association, and possibly the Urbana School District. And then just to update you on two projects too, the brick sidewalk repair project is complete, and then also the concrete sidewalk repair program is also complete. Right now, there is currently an ongoing project of repairing some of the streetscape sidewalk. That's the sidewalk with the brick banding and the unusual joining pattern around the courthouse. So I think we're getting pretty close to kind of having the summer, fall, sidewalk work wrapped up for this year. So that's what I had for updates on other projects. Any questions or concerns about any of those before we jump into the pedestrian master plan update?
Could you clarify what puppy tracks are?
I think that has to do with the crosswalks, I'm guessing.
Okay. It's
That's
not
to be honest, that's the first time I've heard them referred to as puppy
yeah,
tracks.
I was guessing maybe the dotted lines along
Okay,
the
maybe
dotted
that's
lines
what it
along
is.
the bike paths at the intersections that where people.
Right now, they're painted, and then that part hasn't been painted.
Okay, so
Okay.
that's the dashed lines. For,
Yes, that's
okay,
what I'm pretty
okay, that makes sense.
Any
So,
questions for Brad?
Just to answer Audrey's question, the right lane rear side would be at the city limit sign at River.
So you're right, as it's heading east.
Yes, heading, yeah. Yeah.
so moving on to the pedestrian master plan update, and some of these items you've seen from before, but just to kind of start out with items we've got done to date, and this dates all the way back to January. So January, we executed the agreement. We had the kickoff meeting on January 27th. February through March, the website was created. March 30th, they had a meeting to kind of go over some of the initial existing condition research that they had done, as well as do some coordination on the public meetings. April 13th through May 6th, 8 public input meetings were held, and this slide has got a couple of maybe new items that you weren't previously updated on. June 14th, we had the meeting with PACE to kind of get some input regarding disabled individuals in regards to the pedestrian infrastructure. And then here recently on August 9th, we had a project meeting with the Regional Planning Commission where they went over the data I'm going to share with you tonight regarding the public input, both the survey and the comment cards that they got. I'll point out everything I share with you in the presentation on the survey results. I will have Leslie email out so that you'll have your own PDF copy along with all the actual comments. So if you can see the kind of the statistical data which they put together as nice pie charts and word charts, but you also be able to see the raw kind of comment data if you want to go through it. I will caution you that is a long section of the document. I mean, it makes up the bulk of the document, the actual individual comments. So where we are in the process, you can see we're in our 7th month. So we're at the tail end of the existing conditions and jumping, kind of overlapping a little bit into the start of the future plans. So when we go back to the components of the master plan, we've completed the pre-planning portion of it. We are, near the finale of the existing conditions. Part of it, they still have a couple things that they're working on as part of it, but you can see with the exception of the plan and policy reviews, a lot of that has been completed. And then what they're starting on, which is probably the most exciting part, gets into the future plans. So shortly, we'll start working on some of the goals, objectives, performance measures. That's probably the first step of it. And then getting down into some of the pedestrian strategies, recommendations. And then as part of that, there'll be another series of public engagement meetings once we've had an opportunity with you to establish, what the goals, objectives, performance measures, pedestrian strategies, and recommendations are, to present, those to the public and get some input from them as well. And then the next phase after that, I'll be moving into the implementation plan. So, like I mentioned, next steps within the existing conditions are continue to work on the plan and policy review. Coming up next are going to be goals, objectives, and performance measures, and then after that's complete, there will be a series of public meetings. So, like I mentioned, goal setting will be kind of the next phase. So I'll coordinate with Chairman Brown We're thinking maybe sometime in October we can set up a meeting with BPAC members to kind of do some brainstorming of goals for the plan and get your guys' input as far as what you want to see for goals and objectives in the plan. We will have regional planning commission staff, present and lead that effort during a meeting. So that's what I had as far as kind of where we generally are with the pedestrian plan. I'll move next into the specifics of the survey and comment cards. But before we do that, are there any questions as far as kind of where we are in the process and where we're going? Let me move on to the next one. Oop, that's not the right one. There we go. Let's see if I can, where's my maximize button?
Just click on the arrow on the side between the bar, the Adobe bar, and there's a little arrow.
Is that it?
There you go.
Okay. So the first part of this, like I said, I will send all of you a PDF copy of this, so I apologize for the small print. It's probably pretty hard to read. But this just kind of summarizes the public meeting process. You can see they've got the dates and locations of, all the meetings listed out there. They've got the participation in those meetings summarized. There were 115, participants that came to the meeting. There were 114 surveys received prior to today. They actually got in an additional survey this morning. So technically there's actually 114. So I will caution all these results. There is one more survey that will be added onto it. I don't think it's going to change statistically too much. But we do have one additional survey that we will process and include before we get to the final report stage. And they received over 90 comment cards as well. And just to kind of briefly go over, and we'll delve into it in much more detail here, but some of the key findings were, destinations. People seem to, like to walk to Crystal Lake Park, downtown Urbana, Meadowbrook Park, University of Illinois, Urbana Free Library. The streets that people had concerns or issues with regarding pedestrian access were Lincoln Avenue, University Avenue, Vine Street. And then items that were concern for community members, regarding pedestrian infrastructure were crossings, maintenance, major streets, neighborhoods, areas with no sidewalks, parks, safety, sidewalks, and streets. So we will go ahead and jump into these in a little bit more. I kind of go through a series of maps first. So this first one is their area comments. So it shows 3 types of comments that we received. And they're categorized by negative, neutral, or positive. The negative are kind of the light pink. The neutral are the tan or light yellow areas, and the positive are kind of the fuchsia pink areas. So, for example, where my little hand is now was one of the areas that we received a positive comment, or my hand now is kind of lighter pink. That was a negative comment. So these were just kind of categorizing generally people's comments, whether they were positive or negative, kind of, based on areas of pedestrian infrastructure. So you can see, there are definitely more negative comments than there were positive. And you can kind of see where the negative ones were concentrated.
Leo, do you have your mic on? Sorry, so if you had like 10 negative comments in one spot and 1 negative in the other, is there a way of seeing that, or are they all just the same?
Well, I think you'll see in one of the upcoming maps, they actually plotted them out by points. So
Okay.
you can see on that one where the individual locations were. So this was kind of grouping everything together to give you a general overview. And we'll jump to the next one, shows kind of a linear distribution. So, once again, looking at people's comment types, whether it was negative, neutral, or positive. Negative would be red, yellow would be neutral, green would be positive. So these were segments of sidewalk or street that people identified as having negative comments regarding the pedestrian infrastructure. So you can see there are a few areas of green. I guess one to point out in particular is along, I think I'm sorry, I'm in the wrong place. Over here by Crystal Lake Park, that new multi-use path that they put in, north of University, did receive a positive comment, so that's what we like to see. You can see, unfortunately, we have a number of negative comments on there. So that kind of gives you, by street segment or by sidewalk segment, what people's general comment types were. And then getting into the specific point data, you can kind of see the distribution of comment types by negative, neutral, or positive. Once again, red is negative, yellow is neutral, and green is positive. So you can see definitely a lot of the comments or focused in, kind of in the central and western portions of Urbana there. And a lot of it was, south of University Avenue is where a lot of the comments were received.
Were there any, did any of this surprise you, or is this kind of what you expected to see?
I don't know if we really had any expectations going into it. I guess I expected to see maybe more positive comments out in the newer subdivisions, but I don't think we got many comments, period, or much input from the newer subdivisions. Actually, a little bit surprised we actually didn't see more negative comments, particularly, down in southeast Urbana, because there's an awful lot of sidewalk gaps down in that area, and a lot, based on the age of the infrastructure, a lot of it is in bad shape or doesn't meet the current pro-ag requirements. So I'm actually a little surprised. Where my hand on the screen is now, I'm surprised we didn't have more negative comments in that area. And this area is actually an area that was identified as a priority area as part of that pedestrian infrastructure, because there are a lot of older people in that area and people with special needs. And then the final map I have here, and then we'll get more into the pie charts and statistical data. So this just shows what people had indicated, were their preferred walking routes or trips that they took. And you can see, we are getting a high usage of our pedestrian infrastructure, particularly, in our core areas. One takeaway from this is people really like to go to the parks. That seems to be a high designation or destination for people to walk to, and that might be a priority for us to look at, improving access to pedestrian-wise, because it seems to be the parks are really highly utilized, from the comments that we got. Once again, a little surprised that we don't see out in the newer subdivisions, which a lot of them have sidewalks on both sides, because that's something that we require now. You don't see a lot of trips out in there. It does have a tendency to kind of be, more in our core areas.
So, Brad, are they going to weight this showing us which were the more heavily identified routes?
Yeah, we talked about that at the staff meeting, and they were working on some sort of heat map that would be able to show, I think, both for the comments and the walking trips.
Yeah, if they do this in quadrants, then they could weight the lines by, group them into 1 to 10, 10 to 20, or whatever, and then weight them so that we could see the most heavily used routes in addition to a heat map.
Mm-hmm. Then next we'll move into, and hopefully these are a little bit more readable here, but we'll move into some of the survey data. So the first thing we're going to go through is the responses from the the survey that was sent out. And if you can remember, we had received 113 of these prior to today. We're up to 114 today. So the first question is just kind of background data. Are you male or female? You can see we had slightly higher female participation in the survey than we had male. The next question had to do regarding the age, and you can see, we actually do have pretty good representation. The highest group looks like it was the baby boomer generation in here, but I mean, you do have, some millennial participation and others in there. So it looks like a pretty good distribution. I mean, one group that's probably has the lowest representation would be the more senior people. The next graphic we have here represents, how long people have lived at their current residence. You could tell as a college town, we probably have a higher turnover rate. So you can see the 1 to 5 year was, the highest percentage. But once again, I mean, it is a pretty good distribution of people that have been here for a very long time at the 30-plus range to people that have only been here for, sometimes 1 year to 5 years. The next question is kind of an interesting question too. How many cars are there in your household? And this is a little surprising. That 13% of the people filling out the survey answered that they had no car. So their primary mode of transportation, would be mass transit or walking or biking. And you can see, only 42% of the people that filled out the survey had 2 or more cars. So next question is obviously an important question. Why do you walk in Urbana? And this one surprised me because I walk my dog a lot. And
So do a lot of people.
primary reason I get out and
I
walk
don't
is
think
for
we got the
the
dog
dog.
walkers with
But
this
you can
survey.
see. So you can see, I mean, exercise was really high up there. This was one where I think you could answer, multiple things. You didn't have to just pick one. So you can see exercise was real high, recreation very high, and transportation very high as well. But surprisingly low dog walking.
Yeah, we missed that group.
Yeah.
I don't believe it.
And then with question 6, it had to do with what destinations are you walking to? And we gave people some choices. And you can see, the highest was park, which I mentioned, that might be something that we need to look at, is trying to improve our pedestrian access to park. But you see, restaurant was up there pretty high, family and friends, bus stop, shopping, the school, including the university. And what you have down here is for when people actually filled in text answers rather than, checking a box or coloring a circle, where they could actually fill in something. They went to these word weighting or word art where the darker and larger the word is, that indicates a higher frequency that showed up in the survey results. So you can see, park was way up there, the bus stop, was up there from family and friends. So that kind of, to give you an idea, and you'll see this, they did this a lot later on. So you can kind of see, park, that was a fairly high percentage answer. So that was kind of a 2-part question. So the second part of that question was you could list out a specific designation. And once again, this is where people are filling in their answer. They're not going from a pre-selected list. So you see the library ranked really high. It's good to see downtown Urbana, up there. Lincoln Square and the food co-op, seeing those up there. Obviously, the University of Illinois is a popular destination. Market at the Square, Meadowbrook Park, Schnucks. So you can see those were some of the main destinations that people went to. The next one had to do with a road in Urbana that concerns you. You can see the worst one, or most frequently indicated one, was Lincoln Avenue. And that had 27 respondents. And then you also had, Vine Street and Cunningham Avenue. Those both had 17 people that were concerned about those. University Avenue had 13, Windsor Road 9, and Race Street 7. And just to point out, the group, you probably already know this, but those are all either collector or arterial streets. So those are heavy traffic streets. This is the second part of the question. So when they name their street, the follow-up question was, how do you feel about walking across this street? Do you like it? Are you neutral? Do you dislike it? You can see, an overwhelming majority dislike crossing that particular street that they named. And you can see the third part of that question is, how often, if ever, are any of the following a problem with the road? Let me jump to my paper copy so I can see these a little better. So in this first column here, you can see speed, and the way these are weighted, and I apologize, this is hard to see on what's before you, but kind of this bottom part of the bar here, that indicates never. So, for people that had a concern about that road, speed was never part of that concern, would be what this little bottom. So you can see, that's a pretty low percentage. Moving up to kind of the green bar, that indicates people that answered occasionally. And then when you go up to kind of this light blue, that indicates often. And then the dark blue here is always. So you can see, for example, speed was a reason because there's very little, never, and occasionally. So speed was a pretty significant factor in why people selected a road as a problem. You can see the next one is amount of traffic. That one's maybe a little bit more evenly split, but you can see it still is a major factor in why people are concerned about the road. Lack of crossing points. Once again, on this one you can see this one isn't maybe as heavy as the speed and amount of traffic, but once again it's a little bit of a concern. Inadequate crossing time. You can see here this one actually has a larger never, so apparently crossing time might not be as much of an issue for people. You can see lighting, poor lighting. Once again, because these two bottom bars and this one make up more of the total bar, you can see the lighting did not seem to be really an issue for people, which is interesting. Sometimes when we hear from individuals, we hear the opposite, that lighting is a real concern from them. Poor pavements or paths, once again you can see, because these two bottom bars make up the majority of it, that is not quite as much of a concern as speed or amount of traffic. Air pollution, you can see once again the never and occasionally make up a bigger percentage, so that did not seem to be much of a factor. Fear of crime, same thing, it did not seem to have as much impact as either speed or amount of traffic. And separation from travel lane, this one was a little bit more evenly distributed, so you can see this had a little bit more of a factor.
Hey, Brad.
Yeah.
I hate to interrupt or anything. I was just wondering, is there a breakdown for each road? Because some of these are very road specific. Speed is obviously going to be a really big issue on one street that's not going to be a big issue on where lighting is a really big issue for the other street. Are these broken down by the specific streets? Because I feel like there's some major themes that are being clumped together with this information, like maybe air pollution's not a big deal on California, but maybe lighting would be, but speed is a huge thing with air pollution. So I was just wondering,
No, that's an excellent point, and it is not in this report. I will check with Regional Planning Commission and see if we can get that separate breakdown.
I'm afraid that we have so many roads with such varied issues that are fairly specific to that road, that when you clump all the complaints together, you don't get a very good representation of what needs to be done in those specific areas, which it seems like they collected that information and they collected what was wrong and what people's most common problems were, but they clumped it all together.
Yeah.
It can be kind of misleading.
We could do that. Maybe we can kind of do it by category of street, like look at Lincoln and, but also look at maybe some of the locals and see if people had concerns. Remember, this was one where people were naming a specific street, so.
Right.
That's
the point.
I have a feeling, most of the data will probably be for Lincoln, Vine, Windsor.
That's right, and that's why I think,
Yeah.
Yeah,
no, I'm sure we can get that. Now, it won't be in this initial batch I email out to you, but we'll work on getting that for you. And that's an excellent point. So, moving on to the next item, which was question 7.3.
Well, it's the same thing.
Yeah, it's just, I think that's broken down a little differently, so you can see by percentage and then by pie chart. So this is basically the same information that was in the previous slide, just presented in a different format. So you can see, you know, for speed, it was 6% never, 40% occasionally, 41% often, 18% always, so. They're just a little different. And these are the other categories, looking at it as a pie chart method rather than the bars. A couple of other responses that people noted on their survey forms. Everyone but the Race Street pathway by Urbana High. I assume that meant everywhere but the Race Street pathway by Urbana High was what they intended. One side has no sidewalk, which is tricky during winter when road and sidewalks are icy.
That is on the north side of the middle and high school.
Okay.
There's a sidewalk on only the south side, and it does get icy in the winter, and that has been, I've gotten comments from people from Safe Routes to School about that. It's problematic. And we don't have, I don't think we have the right-of-way on the north side of the road.
Which street is that?
I think on Washington.
It's like by the Kendall Gill house there. There's no sidewalk in front of that.
There's no sidewalk on the north side up until, up. I think you have to get to Broadway before there's a sidewalk again on the north side.
Hey, I think this is a really good example of what we were talking about earlier, that a lot of these comments are really specific to the roads that we were asking questions about, and that I would love to know what they were talking about, where they were talking about when they say traffic control signals are hostile to pedestrians, because I'll probably get a takeaway for the intersection that I'm thinking of rather than the other one. Whereas this information is just kind of clumping it all together, and it's hard to really decipher what we need to do.
Yeah, I understand. Then moving on to question number 8. Now think about everywhere within a 20-minute walk or about a mile of your home. How often, if ever, do the following factors affect your ability to walk to places in your local area? Check one box in each line. So, you know, once again, this is kind of the same color scheme as before, you know, for these column charts. So, you know, make sure I got that. So the bottom is never, the green is occasionally, the light blue is often, and the dark blue is always. So you can see, you know, how speed was factored in there. In this case, it would indicate that the majority of the answers were never and occasionally. You see amount of traffic, so it seems, you know, kind of, and once again, I apologize, we're talking in generalities, but for, you know, a lot of the streets around where people actually live, speed and amount of traffic were not a major factor like they were for the streets they identified as seeing as problematic. Lack of crossing points is the next column here. Inadequate crossing time. You can see, you know, kind of a trend in all these is you know, how many often and always answers. You know, for inadequate crossing time, you know, it's actually pretty low here. Poor lighting, poor pavements and paths, noise pollution, air pollution, fear of crime, and separation from travel lane.
Brad, I'm not going to try to, you know, keep on this a little bit, but wouldn't never, it's for something, say, noise pollution, wouldn't that just mean that they're relating that back to a place where there is lots of noise pollution? So they're trying to say that this is not a problem here because it's a problem elsewhere.
Yeah, remember, this question has to do within a 1 mile radius of their home.
20-minute
Yeah.
But I was just also thinking about things like the amount of traffic, where if occasionally it's horrible, that's still, you know, not a good thing.
True.
Depending on the time of day.
True. And, you know, the hard thing about this is, you know, what one person's never or another person's occasionally can cross over. It's, you know, these aren't hard and fast definitions. You know, it can vary within an individual's, you know, response to it. So once again, these are just pie charts that are representing the same as the column charts there. I always find the other responses interesting because this is where people have actually taken the time to write something down. So the response, one of the responses was bikes on sidewalks, always, everywhere. The other was so vague, covers a multitude of roads and road conditions. So that kind of gets back to your comment, Lily. It was kind of a general, question. So question number 9 was, how would you characterize the speed of traffic within a 20-minute radius of your home? You can note here, key findings, 65% of the survey respondents considered the speed of traffic near their home as average, while 30% of it considered it fast. They also listed Lincoln Avenue, Vine Street, Ray Street, University Avenue, Green Street, and Washington Street as roads with speed issues.
But we don't know if Lincoln Avenue was mentioned a million times because it was so average, or that people thought it was slow and average, or that people thought it was too fast, but half of the people thought it was average. I mean, it doesn't break
Well,
it down.
No, it says that they were listed as streets with speed issues.
Speed, no, it's 20-minute radius from your house, right? 1 mile
Right,
of
but
your
then it
home.
says they listed those streets as roads with speed issues.
Well, the way the
No, it's
question was written
characterizing
on
the
on the
speed.
survey is, how would you characterize the speed of traffic within a 20-minute radius of your home? It had 3 boxes you could check: slow, average, and fast. And then under it, it said, please list specific streets.
So I could say that Lincoln Avenue is really slow, and like half the neighborhood could also say that it's average. But I don't know if
Well,
Lincoln
no,
Avenue
you
by
weren't
this
listing the speed for a specific street. You were listing it,
for
characterizing traffic within a 20-minute radius of your home. And then you're supposed to list specific streets.
yeah. So we don't know the specific streets. Yeah. We just know it's getting mentioned, but we don't know what we think about it.
It's like, this is the street that's slow. If it
Yeah,
didn't
I would
say-
think this data would indicate that, generally for streets, 65% people think that the speeds are average, 31, and once again, this is general. That's not applied to Lincoln Avenue. Then when people listed specific streets, these are what came up. So Lincoln Avenue, University Avenue,
They're
Race.
unlikely to list streets that they thought the speeds were slow on.
Yeah, I guess,
Or fast.
didn't we recently lower the speed limit on Lincoln Avenue?
I'd have to defer. I don't know. That might
I
be
don't think
something
so.
No.
I thought
that
part of
Craig
that-
might know. I don't know off the top of my head.
we didn't
Bill. I
include that in the
apologize.
camp. Okay.
But I don't know if Oregon Street is average or slow. I'm just confused as to how the information's represented, how it feels kind of like we're throwing apples and oranges in a basket, hoping to.
I mean, I have, if the average speed
Looking
is
for-
70, then it's average and fast.
Yeah, I mean, I think that people would only list streets if they were speed problems, but they're also looking at what's within 20-minute radius, so they're probably just going to list the fastest street within a mile. So that I
That's
mean,
tough because over half of the streets that they listed as average. So
they wouldn't list a street if they put average. I wouldn't.
I know you wouldn't, but 65% of the people thought that the streets were average, and
And
then
since
they
the
listed
survey
the streets.
said-
No, they didn't necessarily list the street if they said average. Do we know how
So
many?
that
It
is very
said, list the
confusing.
streets. It didn't say list the streets
Yeah, I
you
think
have
this is
concern. It
confusing.
just said list the
Well, it
streets.
said,
That you areas mentioned, which is one
It said,
referring
please
to
list specific streets.
referring to question 9. This is all question
Yeah,
9.
it's a little confusing.
That's certainly very confusing because people said that they were average, but we don't know which ones were average and which ones were fast or slow.
I would anticipate people were thinking that the residential street they're on, the speed is average, and these streets they listed, it was fast, but we don't know that based on the information
Yeah,
we
it's hard to
have.
determine from the question.
Yeah.
And,
Yep.
as an engineer, I mean, slow, average, and fast, is that relative to the post speed?
For sure.
The speed
Absolutely.
limit? Or, what is that relative? Is that, so fast would be, you think people are exceeding the posted speed limit, or?
I'm afraid I don't even know what we were saying about Lincoln Avenue is what I'm concerned about.
Well, I think people.
And that was what
feel the
everybody was
speeds are
talking about, but we
fast.
don't know what they were
Yeah.
saying.
Well, and perception doesn't always match reality. Sometimes people will complain about traffic volume or speed. When you go out and check, they'll complain that people were going too fast when it was really the volume of traffic that was a problem. Most people were going the speed limit. So, but I think what really probably we should have asked was how safe they felt. And that is really the question. The speed is only relevant in terms of people's perception of their safety. And if the speed feels too fast, then they don't feel safe. So I think that, yeah, that question is probably not very, very informative.
Okay.
But it would have been informative if a bunch of people thought it was fast. I mean, that's, but it just, because it was kind of like,
Okay, well, I was going to say, these were the questions that were put in the survey, and you're just telling us the responses people
Correct.
got. So I don't know, if us parsing what should have been asked or shouldn't have been asked at this point is going to be the most helpful way forward. I'm not saying we shouldn't. I'm just
Agreed.
saying I'm not sure it's the most helpful way forward.
Agreed, but I think this information we did collect, but I think how it's represented is not telling us anything. I'm very worried that we actually, this information does exist from the surveys in maybe a raw data form still, but what is here doesn't tell me anything about Lincoln Avenue because I don't know what was applied to it. Was it light, average, or heavy? I don't know how many people thought it was average or heavy. That information probably still exists.
So Lily, what you're saying is you feel the question was a good, valid question, and people responded to it in a valid way,
Yeah.
but the way the data has been sorted is confusing and not maybe
Very.
representative of the way people thought the information would be represented.
Well, I don't know how we. Yeah, absolutely. That plus, it's hard to see what they were trying to say.
I mean, I can say like about the average speed, like a 20-mile walk. I remember filling that question out. 20-minute walk. I remember filling it out, and I'm like, yeah, it's average.
Yeah.
Even though I knew that there was a high-speed street here and a high-speed, I knew the high-speed streets, but I in general said average.
Yeah, and I don't know what
just
streets that
that-
was, but you
yeah.
mentioned streets when you were filling it out, and that's really important to know, and we want to know that, and I think that information was collected. I think the questions are perfectly fine, but right here, these graphs are kind of.
I think that's a valid point. I think we could ask to have more detail on some of these questions and ask if they could state it in a different way. I mean, if that information
Yeah, I
exists.
mean, I'm
in
sure
there.
we can do additional analysis and include that in the report. That shouldn't be a problem. We do have all the raw data collected from the survey. I did not bring that to share with you because it's just pages and pages
Oh, we don't
of
wanna
people's
see that.
text comments, yeah.
That's why we hired consultants.
We're hoping we hired them to do that. That's totally fine for sure.
Well,
Yeah.
just, if we're getting nitpick, I'm gonna.
It's not nitpicky.
No, but no. I think to your point, Lily. If you went back to I didn't say anything on one of the other slides. It was how long have you lived at your house? Like the first one was 6 months or less. The second one was a year or less, or I don't remember what the was. But then they got into 10 to 15 years, 15 to 20, and over 20. All of those categories technically should probably be the same amount of time. Because
Yeah.
if you have one that's only 6 months or less and you have 10 people,
Yeah, you kinda weight
and then
it.
you're comparing to the person that's 20 to 30 years, and they all look like they're about the same.
Right, it's
well,
giving you this idea of
Yeah.
spreading out these values when really, actually, like maybe 50 to 60% of those values were actually all in like a 5-year span.
Yeah, and
So
it's- and
you're
it's like, I didn't say
misrepresenting the
anything 'cause it wasn't a
information.
big deal, but I think to Lily's point, if you're using this information to base future, goals and objectives of the plan, and it's not really accurately portraying what was, the data that was actually given, that's kind of a weird.
I'm so unfortunate to say this, and it's kind of like crushing me a little bit, but I'm worried that this is actually very misleading representations of the information, which totally stinks, but the graphs look really pretty, and I'm worried that they chose the way they represented it to make a graphically pleasing thing that maybe, like, I don't know what they're saying about Lincoln Avenue. You can't parse that information, summarize the information very properly. So That's a little stronger than I thought that I was going to say ever about the urban and pedestrian plan. I'm so happy it's there, and I'm super excited to see the results. It's just that this should, hopefully we can get it changed.
Okay, well, we'll work on it.
Thank you. I'm so sorry.
No problem.
Oh boy.
Item number 10, or question number 10, I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah, no, and I apologize. Never thought I'd have this new conflict.
How could you characterize the amount of traffic within a 20-minute radius of your home? So this had to do kind of with the volume of traffic. So the amount of traffic near, this was a key finding, the amount of traffic near homes was considered by average by 68% of respondents, while 16% considered it heavy and 16% light. I note that Lincoln Avenue was, once again mentioned frequently by respondents. On the survey, point out, this is kind of similar to question 9. So the way it read on the survey was, how would you characterize the amount of traffic within 20-minute radius of your home? 3 boxes to check, light, average, heavy, and then it says, please list specific streets. So kind of a similar format to the previous, question.
And I don't mind that someone might think that Lincoln Avenue has very light traffic, but it would be nice to know how many people thought it was heavy traffic, how many people thought it was average traffic, and how many people was light traffic, since so many people cared about Lincoln Avenue.
Yeah, I think that's valid. I think we understand, and maybe if there were 3 word clouds instead of 1, maybe one word cloud for each light, heavy, and
Yeah, that would be
average, it
great,
would-
because
it
some
would fix
streets
the
are
problem.
light traffic. We should give them high fives. I mean, more people thought they were than not. That's what we were really asking for with the survey, right?
And specifically, Lily, you're interested in this because if you have access to this information, you might be able to talk to people who might help make Lincoln Avenue a more high-traffic place for pedestrians and cyclists, and not just
Yeah,
vehicles.
absolutely. We would want to use the survey data that we collected. That's why we asked for it, and I don't know how much I can really discern from. I mean, maybe everybody thought it was a light, that 16% is what makes this so bold, because it's just 16% life traffic. We all know that's not the case, but we don't know what the breakdown is. And what you said, Brad, earlier was completely right, that light, average, heavy is so different for everybody. But that's why we asked the survey question, is because we want to know how many people thought it's heavy, average, or light. And that's Lincoln Avenue just as an example, but all these streets are ones that we're all concerned as a committee. I mean, I don't know what they're trying to say about Vine Street from this graph. It's sad. Because a lot of people said something about Vine Street. That's all I know.
Doing
Yeah.
a word cloud for heavy, word cloud for light, and a word cloud for average would that would do it.
Well, I think there's, if you look at the survey form, I don't think they have, I guess
I don't know that they have it broken down that way.
Yeah, I think what they'll have is someone check the box slow, for example, and then they listed X streets. But that doesn't, you're kind of making a interpretation that, that check box goes with those specific streets. So-
Do we have information about the addresses of where people live that filled out the survey? I haven't seen a map of that. Do they mark like the nearest intersection or anything?
There was a map in the earlier part of,
Just a point map or something where everybody that filled out the survey lived?
those were for specific intersections.
Yeah, I
that
don't
we're
see
counting.
anywhere on the
So we don't even know if we got an even distribution across this town, across the
survey
city.
form, or it indicates the,
They didn't have where we got them from. Yeah, we know.
Yeah, but we still don't know why everybody mentioned Lincoln Avenue.
well, I think they had concerns with it, is why you see it mentioned so frequently.
Yeah, but most people said that they don't have concerns with the roads that they mentioned, so we couldn't say that, even if we were just going to assume that, just for benefit of the doubt.
The other thing I think this could get back to is destination and connectivity, which, Brad, you were talking about earlier. A lot of people, when they walk, are interested in maybe walking to a park or walking to Schnucks, or and what the way forward for the pedestrian plan will hopefully be like a strong destination and connectivity paths that we feel are really strong pedestrian paths. And everyone, I think most people eventually at some point when they live in Urbana cross Lincoln Avenue because the university's there. So maybe that's another reason why Lincoln Avenue is coming up, because eventually people cross Lincoln Avenue and it has such a great name that you can remember. I mean, honestly, you can remember Lincoln Avenue. Because you're like, why couldn't I get across this street? And you're like, what's the name of this street? And you just kind of start cataloging where you can walk and where you can't walk. But that would be another reason why I'm thinking it comes up frequently.
Well, for future reference, this is, the data collection for this works really well if you use Wiki Maps. And put that online. People can draw the segment that they have concerns about and attach the comments to the segment. And then you can tabulate that data. I think part of our problem here is the way in which we collected the data, which was paper survey. And when you were there, you got to pick one route to map on the map. And so the route that you walk most often may not be the route that you have concerns with because you don't walk the route that you have concerns with. So I think part of it is the instrument was perhaps not gathering some of the data that we were hoping for, but we'll have to work with what we've got.
Question 11 was, how long do you usually have to wait before crossing roads within a 20-minute radius from your home? And you can see the breakdown here. Key findings, almost 70% of respondents indicated that the wait time to cross roads closer to home was between 30 seconds and 2 minutes. However, 9% pointed out that their wait time was 3 minutes or longer.
Question 12 looks like it will be helpful.
Yeah, and then question 12 says, do you avoid walking along or across certain streets? And once again, there are 3 boxes you could check: yes, yes when I can, and no. And then there was kind of a follow-up, which was, please provide locations you avoid walking at and
Yes.
why.
That will be helpful information.
And here it says key findings, 85% of respondents are attempting to avoid walking along or across certain streets in Urbana. The 2 most avoided roads are University Avenue, Lincoln Avenue, and Vine Street,
Yep.
which probably doesn't surprise too many people.
No. No.
So, and you can see this is kind of the word weighting. So you can see, University Avenue, Lincoln Avenue, Vine Street, Philo. What?
Yes. Yes, this is helpful information.
Okay. So we got there eventually.
Yes. See, this says something.
And I'm sure we have the specific data for how many times University Avenue was named versus Lincoln Avenue versus Vine Street. Because that's how the weight of the word is based off, is the number of hits.
This is a great example of where the graphical representation matches what we were trying to show.
Mm-hmm.
The other ones we need to go back and look at.
And then question 13 was, if you avoid walking along or across certain streets, please tell us why that is. And you can see the breakdown here. The key findings were the speed and amount of traffic were the top factors leading respondents to avoid walking or crossing certain streets. Other popular factors mentioned by respondents and not listed in the options provided by the survey were lack of sidewalks and sidewalks in poor condition. Yep. So you can kind of see the breakdown there. Speed and traffic and amount of traffic were, the 2 highest percent. Lack of crossing points, would be the 3rd highest. Crossings not allowing adequate time to cross, is probably 4th. And then I prefer an alternative route is probably 5th. And then you can see noise pollution, air pollution, and fear of crime were fairly low, probably in the 20 to the 30 percentile range. And then for the where people listed other as part of the question, you can see no sidewalks, was, the highest out of those responses, sidewalks in poor condition. Once again, it's kind of surprising, poor lighting was not very high. Residents, sidewalks obstructed by litter, snow, and other, once again, were fairly low. Traffic does not stop at crosswalk was another thing that people listed as a reason as well, but it was fairly low. Question 14, are there improvements you would like to see that would make it easier to get around your area? And it says, please specify where you would like to see improvements in your neighborhood or anywhere in the city. And you can see these were kind of a representation of what people wrote down. So once again, parks, jumps out at you, neighborhood, streets, downtown. Interestingly, brick and sidewalk repair is in there. I assume the waterways refers to the Boneyard Creek crossing or the Boneyard Creek. You see University of Illinois in there. So, once again, you can see major streets is listed. So I do think, we do have, an issue with some of our collector and arterials, regarding, pedestrians. That seems to be a kind of a common theme.
Yeah, I think it's telling that none of the streets that we have done road diets on for extensive length, like Philo and Maine, are listed. Lincoln, we only did a road diet on part of it, and so the majority of it is still 4 lanes.
Where there are no crossings.
Yeah.
And then you can see this was part of that question 14 as well. Please specify where you'd like to see the city improvements. And, once again, Lincoln Avenue really jumps out at you. Lincoln Avenue is probably going to think it's being picked on. But you see,
It is like a gateway to Urbana.
Yeah, that's where the
It's a
majority
very
of
much-
people are, that's where the core and the density of people walking was, and I think it serves as a barrier.
Brad, can you imagine this community if more of our new community members, which let's assume is from the survey is like 50 to 60% of these, less than 5 years people who have lived in this community saw Lincoln Avenue that was very walkable, very bikeable, and that was one of their first impressions of the community, as opposed to getting off the highway and seeing what we do see today.
yeah. And I mean, you're exact. I mean, all our major arterials and collectors, that's what most people see.
Yeah.
Very few people see the local street. So yeah, it actually surprised me a little bit that University Avenue actually ranked lower than Lincoln Avenue. That is something that surprised me, because I think it's University Avenue, and this is my personal opinion.
It's probably
being the most
destination
dangerous.
oriented.
Yeah, it's mostly to do with destinations. If you commute by walking every day across Lincoln,
Yeah,
rather
to the
than
university.
go once a month up to Jimmy
Yeah.
John's or something.
And most pedestrians avoid University Avenue, so it won't even come up in there. They won't bike there, they won't walk there. Yeah, but Lincoln, you do try to get across.
And I would guess the comments for Lincoln would be north of Springfield, because south of Springfield, it's not. I mean, when it could down that
It-
3-lane cross-section, it's
No,
pretty
it's
You mean
Yeah,
like
there's some
Nevada?
problems
No,
in
it's
the
north of Nevada.
area.
Nevada.
Iowa. They've had
Nevada
some
goes back to
issues.
4 lanes.
Yeah. Where also none of the roads line up with the university. So you just watch people scurry across.
Question 15 is, are there places you want to walk to but currently cannot? And once again, Lincoln Avenue raises its ugly head in here again. So, but Florida Avenue was on there. That one surprised me a little bit. I've heard Crystal Lake Park from a number of people in the community as a destination that's very hard to get to. And
Yeah.
University Avenue is obviously a big impact
Yep.
on limiting access to that.
I think you'd read a lot of those Crystal Lake Park ones as part, like you could combine University Avenue comments with Crystal Lake, because that's
And
the
Lincoln Avenue for the people on the east side of Lincoln Avenue, crossing Lincoln to get to Crystal Lake. If you had kids, I'm on the west side, on the west side trying to cross Lincoln Avenue to get to Crystal Lake.
Oh,
Sorry.
that would mean you'd live. Oh, okay,
West
I
of-
see.
Yeah, I said the wrong direction. Yeah. over in the area around Martin Luther King Elementary.
And then, so for question 15, this was also kind of the word out of what people listed. So you see major streets, was a
We don't know
high
what that
one.
means.
This one to me doesn't provide as much valuable information. as the
Yeah,
previous
I think
one.
the word cloud's a nice idea, but it's not giving us any information here.
It's probably reflecting, the results from the survey, and maybe the survey just won't give us much for that question.
Yeah. The next one's kind of a similar situation. So this is just kind of an open-ended question. Any other comments? So you can see based on what people wrote down, appreciation, which as city staff, I'm glad to see that was the number one. So apparently people are very appreciative of us either doing the pedestrian master plan or reaching out through the survey to collect their input. But you can see neighborhoods, is a common theme. Safety, was in there as well. Once again, major streets, speeding. We talked about this impact of speed on
Yep.
on people's concerns about walking. So you can see some of that embedded in that. And once again, this is the breakdown. So you can see these are some of the specific locations that people mentioned under item 16. So you can see citywide, and then some of the specific destinations: East Urbana, downtown Urbana, University of Illinois, Meyer. That probably has to do more with their destinations. Then moving on to the comment card. So what we went over now was just the walking preferences survey. So they also, at the meetings, had a separate comment card, which included 6 questions that they asked people to fill out and either return at the meeting or they could mail it in. So you can see these, question 1. Here we go. So listed below are the locations and all the comment card responses. So, and we'll go through the questions here shortly. But once again, these are kind of, what people were referencing either as destinations or locations that they had issues with. Listed below are the subjects mentioned on all major comment card responses. So this is taking all the questions and looking at what was the most repeated frequency of words. So you see neighborhoods, parks, again, jumps out, major streets, which probably has to do more with problems than anything else. So getting into the actual questions, what is your favorite place to walk in Urbana? You see Meadowbrook Park looked like it was the top designation. And I don't know if it would be helpful if you guys want to see like how many actual responses rather than just the weight of the word might be useful. That 27 people said it or 80 people said it. But you can see the other destination that came out: Crystal Lake Park, downtown Urbana, West Urbana, East Urbana.
I think a really good takeaway from this is how many people want to go to Crystal Lake Park as much as they already go to Meadowbrook Park.
Mm-hmm.
It seems to be a reoccurring theme, is they can't get to Crystal Lake Park, and they're very frustrated about it, but they love Meadowbrook, and I think a lot of people are saying this in the survey.
I would just say they love the experience of going to Meadowbrook Park and getting the exercise, leaving their house. They love the entire experience of leaving their house and getting to Meadowbrook Park, aside from crossing that one giant street, Windsor Road. That crossing is pretty bad. I saw a little kid go right into it this last week, I seriously just put my bike in Windsor Road. I was freaking out. That said, as a person who kind of likes little bike route, who likes to come up with like 45-minute bike routes or whatever, I never go to Crystal Lake Park. I find it to be completely a hassle to try to get across University Avenue, and I don't want to risk my life bothering with that, to try to get on the left side of the road or the right side of the road and try to get across the intersection at University Avenue. And so that's, when I filled out the survey, that's what I had in my mind. As I was trying to say, I like getting to Meadowbrook Park, and I like being at Meadowbrook Park and moving through it. It'd be great if we could make it so people could do Crystal Lake Park and then go to Meadowbrook Park, like make it a wonderful, because they're both such interesting parks and they both have different experiences. So.
And just as long as this is, comment time, I guess, for fun story time. But I see this all the time with the students I work with on campus, that the very confident bike riders on campus will want to do bike rides to Crystal Lake Park, and they will convince, drag, bribe, do whatever they can to get all sorts of other cyclists who are less confident to go to Crystal Lake Park with them, because they see it as this hidden gem that's just far enough away from campus that it's something really exotic and cool. Less so than Meadowbrook Park, which is closer to campus. And you will see the cyclists that they pull along with them, these bike rides, get really frazzled as they get up to University Avenue. And I see this over and over again with different students. And I've only been working there for a year and a half. So it's a reoccurring problem.
So do they usually cross at Broadway? Do you know? I mean, that's where I usually cross.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
you'd think that once you did it a couple of times, that it would.
So I think our really confident cyclists that are leading those rides feel that way. But I think all the people that are new and they come along because they're used to campus cycling almost exclusively, they are very frazzled by the experience.
I'm glad they're dragging people around. I mean, I think that helps.
I encourage it, for sure.
Do you think, Lily, do you think that's a perception thing from those new bicyclists, or is it more a
I think-
reality of this is just not good enough for them?
I think the perception and the reality are two in the same. I think a lot of the things that we see in the survey and the complaints that we get from these roads, primarily Lincoln Avenue, but I think very similar things can be applied to University that, like Brad mentioned, are why students are starting to get frazzled by the intersection, Broadway leading up to University Avenue too as well. It starts to get more and more uneasy as you feel more and more isolated on the road for beginning cyclists.
And if we're talking about pedestrians, Leo, if I run, and I do a run from my house to Meadowbrook Park, do a loop around Meadowbrook Park and come home, it's all very low stress. It's all very chillax. If I want to do a run to Crystal Lake Park, which I would like to do at some point, I hit University Avenue. There's only one way to cross it. I have to boogie around, do certain different things, and it just kind of ruins the whole flow of your run. You're like, and then you have to do it again coming back. Like, it's not like it's just one time. You have to both ways. And then again, there's only one way to cross University Avenue right now. There's not even a crosswalk there for pedestrians on Broadway. I mean, it's pretty mind-blowing. I mean, I've seen parents with little kids try to get across that street. So if we are talking about pedestrians, it's a complete barrier.
I never run to Crystal Lake.
Yeah, and
Meadowbrook
parents
all the
just
time.
drive. Most parents I talk to
Yeah.
just drive.
Yeah.
They're like, I won't take my kids on bikes or walk. I will drive to the pool. I will drive. They're like, I will drive. And that's why you all have to have so much parking there for cars.
I would like to also point out that a lot of us are coming from a farther south than University Avenue perspective in this, and that if I try to get students who are starting in Champaign or starting near campus and near Wright Street, they'll go up north and they'll try to cross Lincoln Avenue. And that's just as problematic at Lincoln Avenue when you're trying to cross north of University as University at Broadway and all of those intersections. So I just want to bring up that perspective that a lot of us see University from the south side looking north.
It's probably a
That
good,
there's
that would be
also-
a good segue to the wayfinding discussion, but we don't have one tonight. So, in the interest of time, are you getting close to the end, Brad?
Thank
Okay.
you.
So I'll kind of go maybe a little quicker through these remaining ones. So question 2 was, in the future, where would you like to walk? And you can see, obviously, Crystal Lake Park shows up there. Downtown Urbana actually seemed to be the top designation. I'm glad to see Boneyard Creek on there as well. This was question 2. This would be subjects reference. So you can see, neighborhoods, once again, parks. It seems to be a pretty consistent theme. Question 3, where in Urbana do you think there are walkability issues? So once again, the usual suspects are in this lineup.
Yep.
Yeah. And there is some crossover between the survey and the comment card questions.
Safety.
Yeah, comment card question number 4, what do you think this plan should accomplish in the next 5 years? So this is actually kind of an interesting question from the master plan. So you see safety obviously was the highest, but crossings, maintenance, which I assume refers to sidewalk repair and vegetation, keeping that down. Sidewalk conditions up there. Interesting, traffic calming did not show up as, you can see it's on there, but it wasn't too huge of one. So for that question, where would people like to see it? They want to see it everywhere, it seems to be the predominant answer, so I can understand that. Question 5, are there any other issues, concerns, or suggestions you would like to bring to our attention about existing conditions in this report? And crossings and safety were the major ones. We can also see major roads up there. Once again, I think this gets back to the University of Lincoln issue. Once again, where would you want to see this? Everywhere seems to be the popular answer. And I don't want to spend too much on this, but this was just how people found out about the meeting. And I guess one thing our big takeaway from this was don't spend money advertising in News Gazette. You don't get much bang for your buck. You can see we got a lot more by email, Facebook. City website actually got more people to come than publishing. But we did publish in the News Gazette. And another interesting one is Gabe actually showed up.
I was just going to say, Gabe held his own to the News Gazette, for sure. I mean, I guess we were paying him as well, so.
So that's all I have
yeah,
for the presentation. I will have Leslie send out this PDF along with, I will send the raw data if you want to look through it, but I will also contact Regional Planning Commission and see if we can come up with some additional analysis to address the concerns that you had and get that out to you. But tonight was just to kind of introduce you to it. We'll present it with you. I know this is a lot to take in and process, so this is kind of the initial. I mean, feel free, if you have comments or concerns, to email me or call me, or if you want to stop by the office and talk to me, that's fine too. But this is kind of the initial. You don't have to, before we leave tonight, you don't have to like get me all your stuff. You have some time to process it.
So can we consider that like the draft version of the
Yes.
public input portion of the master plan, so we can still provide input and maybe
Yes,
get some
absolutely.
of that refined?
Yeah, this is just a starting point to push the information out to you. And as you think of additional things, or want to know about this or that, let me know, and we'll look into it, see if we can provide that information to you. So this is just a starting point to get it out to you. But I didn't want to send you that massive document because we just got it last week. You really wouldn't have had time to read it and digest it. So tonight's just to present it, and at future meetings we can talk about things as well if you want to do it in that format, or like I said, contact me and we can talk. So that's all I had.
Okay, thank you.
I just want to say nice work, Brad, and there's a ton of information there. And you mentioned also there's going to be a meeting in October coming up with the...
Yeah, what we'd like to do is in October actually have a goals and objectives meeting, and I'll talk to Chairman Brown about that, whether we want to do that as a separate meeting in the issue of time. I'm a little concerned about being able to get to other agenda
Sure.
items if we're focusing on goals, objectives. I mean, that might be a meeting in itself kind of thing, so we can specifically just focus on those. But we can talk about it and we'll work out all the logistics. But we're thinking October timeframe, if we can make that work for everybody's schedule.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you so much, Brad.
Oh, no problem. Thank you, guys. Appreciate your
Really.
input. It was really good.
So we want to make sure to have enough time for Cynthia's presentation and the bike riding on sidewalks discussion. Was there a specific question about the BPAC survey you could bring up
A couple
quickly?
announcements.
Okay.
One is that it's been extended, the period of time for the survey, so I've passed out the flyer, and there are paper copies available too for people who are not on the internet. I've handed those out at Douglas Library, which is in Champaign, but some churches, Urbana Library. I'm going to hit the businesses next on University Avenue specifically to try and get some more interest in the survey, which is a little bit redundant in some ways with the survey that we just went over. I mean, some of the same questions are kind of there, but it's an awareness opportunity for BPAC. So I passed out these flyers if people have any place that they think they can post awareness of it. My next, and that's basically it for the survey question.
Yeah, email us a picture of the flyer and we can send it out on
Pass this
social
down to
media.
them. Yeah, the PDF, you mean, you want the
and I can make
PDF
a
of
picture
this?
out of it. It's easier to post on social media as a picture, but I can easily convert it to a JPEG.
Okay.
And if it's a PDF, I could print it off.
Yep, yep. Just send it as a PDF. I'll
Okay.
manage it.
And I think that it's probably open till the end of the month, I think is what it is. They paid SurveyMonkey for like another month of work on that.
Yep.
And I don't know how we're going to input any paper response we get. I heard from the librarians they thought it was highly unlikely we'd get any, but if we do, we'll figure it out.
I have an intern.
So did you say you did have it posted at the library by the computers and everything? Okay, cool.
Thanks, Audrey.
Thanks. So any questions about that? You want to go ahead with the University
Kevin
Avenue?
Garcia, help.
In the Central Business District.
And then on the University Avenue, did you want to bring something up on that?
Yeah, I know that Cynthia and Annie both sent letters, I believe, to IDOT. I was wondering if they had any update on any kind of feedback from that. And just a couple thoughts on next items. One thing I wanted to announce is that while researching it, I found the University Avenue corridor study that was done in 2010 by CCRPC.
Which
And
we
had
had-
some really interesting concepts, which we've been going over and over.
Published 2011, yeah.
And we had put in there that we wanted to update it in 5 years, which is past. We don't have the funding.
We are currently working on that, though.
Oh, good.
And they have some really interesting crash data too. I believe, although I can't specifically find it, that there were no deaths in the 10 years prior to the study, and there have been 7 in the 10 years since
I think there had been
No.
some,
Yeah.
on University Avenue.
yes, because there was
Oh.
someone in the math department who was killed about 10 years
Well, I know
ago.
for the 5 years didn't have any. That one I can find.
Yeah,
but
5
the
years,
10
that
years,
maybe,
I
but-
think there may have been none in actually in the previous 10.
So-
So something's happened on University Avenue. I think going
A
from
lot of
0 to
people-
7 is
Well, a
pretty
lot of people are
significant.
now living on the north side,
And
which
a lot
we
of-
knew was coming.
A lot more traffic and more development at Carl, and more people parked on the south side of University and going to Carl.
Yep.
Did anyone get a response
No.
to their notes? Did you have anything to add, Brad, about anything University Avenue updates?
No, I don't have anything to add.
Annie, thanks
No,
for sending your letter
yeah.
around. That was good.
Okay, well,
Yeah, so I was just going to say, yeah, I sent the letter. I sent it to a bunch of people. I did not get any responses and from anybody, which is fine. I mean, it's a pretty long letter, actually. It's like 6 pages. And I made, well, what it's like 2 letters. It's 2 pages long, and then I just talked about my notes, which was save the 13 trees, the safe system approach, the role of self-explaining and forgiving road infrastructure, vehicle speeds, stormwater management, and creating livable streets. So I just put in just notes of contemporary, how people are building roads in contemporary ways. So that was kind of my, and today a study came out, well, today the statistics have come out that traffic fatalities in Illinois have increased in the first 6 months of this year over the same period in previous years. It's up by 17%. So, and they are attributing it to speed. So that's just FYI.
Thanks.
Thank you so much, Amy.
Let's go on to the bicycle riding on the Central Business District sidewalks. Brad?
Yeah, and I was hoping Carolyn Baxley was going to be here this evening, because that was the person that brought this to our attention. And I promise this slideshow is shorter than the last one. There's only a couple slides, but I want to kind of talk about what the ordinance is, how it's signed, kind of the history of it real quick, and then what's been done, and then we'll open it up for discussion. And that's where we're really seeking some input. In the past, this has always gone to Traffic Commission. There's been some discussions in Traffic Commission. I think actually BPAC would be more appropriate, for handling this. So I'll run through my presentation real quick, and then we can kind of, I think probably the discussion format would probably be the most helpful and useful portion of it. But so we do have this ordinance. in the city code regarding riding on sidewalks. Specifically, it's section 23-144. And believe it or not, it was adopted back in 1997. So this is an old ordinance. And specifically, it says, no person shall ride a bicycle upon a sidewalk within the central business district. So that's kind of the crux of it. You might ask yourself, where is the central business district? And I will show you on the next slide. The interesting thing is Part B of it actually just has to apply with, kind of citywide that, bicyclists are supposed to yield to pedestrians. So, but specifically, we're focusing on item A as it relates to the downtown area. So the central business district, it is bounded in the north by Water Street. It is bounded in the south by Illinois, Cedar Street on the west, and Urbana Avenue. So actually, and this is kind of something that surprised me when I was putting this together, it actually encompasses a pretty good area where there is a high amount of pedestrian traffic, but also an area where we have a lot of bike facilities. We've got the bike, lanes on Main Street and Broadway. You've got a lot of bike parking as well. Specifically, in this area, the only place that has been signed specifically restricting bikes on sidewalks is on Main Street from Broadway to kind of where Main and Springfield split. So west of Ray Street there, where they Y off into Main and Springfield. So that's the only section that is specifically signed that I could find when I was out driving. And then there is a fine, and it is a fairly significant fine if you're caught by the police riding your bicycle on the sidewalk. And you can see this is out of the city code once again. So if you violate section 23-144, which said no riding your bike on the sidewalks in the central business district, the fine is $100. That's what the signs look like. You can see this is over by the parking deck. So like I said, the only place I could find the signs was on Main Street between Broadway and where it splits between Main and Springfield. And you can see on the signs very clear, bikes are prohibited and the fine is $100. So talk a little bit about timeline. I mentioned earlier, ordinance was adopted in 97. In August 2000, Traffic Commission approved putting up signage. At the time, it was just a white sign that said, I think, no bikes. It's kind of an ugly looking, it was a white sign with black letters. Interestingly, they actually in September, so a month later, apparently the signs weren't working to the desired effect, so they actually put decals, which is they created a sign in cardboard and actually started spray painting it on the sidewalk. And the story I heard to go along with this was the people downtown were so upset by this that they actually made the sign crew stop mid-installation and stop doing that. So the decaling or the spraying on the actual sidewalk panels, no bikes, was not received well by the community and abandoned. And then November 2007, as I mentioned, the signs that initially were put up were just kind of white signs with black lettering. They were replaced with the signs that you saw in that picture, and a little bit more colorful with the, symbology on it, indicating as well as what the amount of the fine was. I believe the fine started out initially too. It was $50 and it was increased up to $100. They did go through a public notification, trying to get the word out to people to do it, and some warnings were issued by the police. The problem again kind of came up in July 2010. There, once again, more public notification was done. Some warnings were issued, and after a period of time, there were actually tickets for the $100 offense issued, and there was actually some coverage in the press regarding that. I know some of you probably remember and were involved in that. Then kind of the next point in the timeline was, I guess, in November 2011, Public Works actually put together some sandwich boards. So these would be in addition to the signs that are mounted on either street lights, or other city infrastructure poles indicating no bike riding. So these were additional signage. And one was given to Carolyn Baxley, and the other resided with the Urbana Business Association. And the idea behind that was they could put those signs specifically out on the sidewalk if they saw, that people were riding on it. We're in the process of replacing the one that went to UBA. That sign disappeared or was loaned out or something happened to it so that UVA doesn't have it, but we're working on getting that out there. And then the way this has been dealt with up to this point, these have been what have been used. So we've had the signage, and I personally went out and looked at it, and it is pretty, in my opinion, it's pretty adequately signed. I mean, I don't know how you can miss it. I mean, it's there. And it's pretty evident. I mean, it's at every intersection along Main Street there. Education, I know when Jennifer did the instructional video with the City of Champaign, I think as part of that video there was actually a short segment talking about the prohibitions, I think both in Champaign and Urbana, in the areas where you could not ride your bike on the sidewalk. Enforcement, like I mentioned, the police have given warnings. They've actually given the tickets. I've seen by the correspondence, I mean, the enforcement is not popular with the police. I mean, it's difficult on them, resource-wise, to actually have a person. You have to have, obviously, an officer there to catch the person in the act to be able to issue the warning and the ticket. And then you do have kind of the negative pushback from residents that are upset about getting a $100 fine for riding their bike. So I mean, there is kind of a political public part of it. And then I guess I opened it up to you guys as being heavily involved in the bicycling community. If you could help us out with ways to try to mitigate. I mean, we did add the bike lanes along Main Street, so the hope was that the bicyclists would use those as opposed to being on the sidewalk, but apparently there still are issues with bikes being on the sidewalk. So with that, I'll open it up to discussion.
Brad, the key pieces of information I asked for when this was raised before is, have we had crashes with pedestrians? And because perception and actual problem may not be the same thing. I'm not saying that people aren't riding on the sidewalk. But that's a question on my mind, and I think it also might be instructive for there to be some counts done, because are we talking about 3 bicyclists a day or 15? And that makes a big difference. And in terms of how much time we spend on this, if no one's been hit and no one's been hurt, we have other places where we know people are getting hit and hurt and killed. Not that this isn't important, but I would like for us to spend our time, relatively speaking, on those issues that are of the most critical importance.
Okay. I will pull together information for the crashes. I know just kind of anecdotally I've heard about a person that broke their arm, but I want to say I think it was a number of years ago, coming out of heel to toe where they were struck by a and then I think I've heard about maybe one other, but we can pull together the specific.
That would be helpful.
On the counts, I'm not sure we have the resources to be able to do that. We'll have to look at staff ability.
I mean, I think if it's, it could be a perceived problem, but even a perceived problem is a problem, especially if it's preventing people from walking comfortably on the sidewalks or feeling endangered. What I was curious about is maybe trying some, I mean, it's really going to take a change in culture. I think this $100 fine, people would say, well, nobody's going to bother, or, what are the chances I'm actually going to get a $100 fine? But I think there needs to be a change in culture if you expect people to walk their bikes on the sidewalk. And I do think we need to say, walk your bike, not no bikes. We need to say the bikes are welcome on sidewalk, but you have to walk it. So I put some examples of signs on the other cities use. If you can bring up that Explorer, I think, yeah, any of those JPEGs. Just a little kinder, gentler way of approaching it and saying that bikes are welcome, but it's not like you're disallowing bikes. The other thing I wondered about is I think the central business district is a large district, and I think it's really unreasonable to expect people going to the farmer's market, especially kids, not to ride on the sidewalk. So I think we should
That's
consider
not reasonable.
making it a smaller area, maybe just Main Street or wherever the main concerns are. But I sat in front of Pizza Inn a couple weeks ago for a half hour and saw two people riding relatively fast down the sidewalk.
Okay.
That's, just anecdotal, and I'm sure that,
Well, perhaps the Urbana Business Association could do some counts for us.
I would just like to say that there's also some cities that don't ride on they meet in the middle. I mean, I do think there are some areas over there that are really narrow, and I completely agree with Cynthia. That we just talked about the pedestrian plan where a lot of people have a lot of safety concerns,
And Main Street
and
wasn't
we
one of
have
them.
maybe a handful of moments where we have interactions between bikes and pedestrians around here, but it's uncomfortable, and this may be a perceived problem, which is a problem. There are some places that will have a 12 or an under, so if you're above 12 years old, you should be riding in the street. Otherwise, you're a nuisance to pedestrians. And I completely agree, enforcement, but we do want to be a bike-friendly community, and a really good way of doing that is we do already have an education enforcement campaign in Urbana that we do every fall on campus for stop sign usage. Maybe downtown pedestrian bicycle interactions would be greatly improved if we did an education campaign there where we stop people and we could give them a ticket and they could defer it by taking an educational course, which I think if I was going to, this is
Cops would
completely
be more willing
anecdotal,
to
but
do
if I'm
that.
going to say, I think a lot of our sidewalk riders don't know this, and they don't think that riding in the street is safe. They just need to be educated as cyclists. And we do this with car drivers. If you get enough speeding tickets, you have to take a class. It's apparent that you need to learn more about driving. I mean, it's apparent if you're riding on the sidewalk, you need to learn more about cycling too.
So maybe using our deferred ticket program as a tool down there is a good idea. I think that's a great idea.
I think residents won't be as upset for the really heavy fine, and then they'll be getting educated, which is what really I think a lot of pedestrians want cyclists
Yep.
to.
That's a great, and I like your signs too. I like walk your bike.
Yeah, I like,
I think that's more clear.
there was one where it was kind of engraved in the pavement or something, but if they don't want us to do that, we won't. But it wasn't too bad.
I like how I think it's welcoming. That's
Yeah.
what I like, and I think it talks about us
like that,
having
too.
civility, and talks about these are the shared values of our community, that we do have a lot of cyclists, and because we have a lot of cyclists, this is how we would like you to behave. That's what I like about it, and it educates people instead of punishing people. It's a new way of doing signs. In the past, signs were all, don't do this, don't do that, and new signs are, if you look up, you will see a hawk's nest, so it's a different way of. So I think that's really good. My question to Brad would be, as a person who was delayed about 30 minutes yesterday because of an accident on University Avenue and watching two Urbana police officers standing out in the middle of this intersection, trying to direct 4 lanes of traffic on this insane intersection would be.
Smith Road, wasn't it?
It was the one by the county mart. It was I was trying to get to I was trying to do some gardening. But what I was going to say is, I saw those folks out there, and I was like, wow, this must cost us a lot of money. The accidents on University Avenue must cost us as taxpayers a lot of money and time and energy, and people getting injured, of course, costs a lot of money. And so that would honestly be my other question would be how much, because when we asked that the University Avenue speed limit be dropped to 25 miles per hour, the Traffic Commission, or IDOT, said that there would have to be enforcement by the Urbana Police Department at all times. And the police chief obviously said they do not have the resources to enforce those limits. And obviously the police chief does not have the resources to enforce people biking on sidewalks in downtown Urbana. But I would be curious, like Cynthia's asking, what the cost has been to the city of Urbana with people getting in bike accidents, and how much it costs when people get in bike accidents in the downtown district, how much that costs, what happens with that, if that data is even available.
I can check and see if it is.
Yeah, but I do love Bill's approach, because I just think it's more of a yes approach and less of a no approach. And it's just, it would shame me into actually walking my bike. Versus right now, when I'm trying to get to the on-street bike parking, I honestly go around I do a little shortcut. So that would be I think it's a yes to Bill's idea.
I'd like to just make one point to Annie's comment about the police chief. That was a different police chief. We do have a new police chief now who might have a different view on where enforcement can happen. And I also, when I was up on handing out these surveys, I was told that they would appreciate more enforcement of the speed limit on Bradley Avenue, which is 30 miles an hour, not 35. And
The new bike lanes might help.
I thought the very narrow road made me feel like going a lot slower. But yeah, it's. I told them that there is a new police chief, and their view on resources for enforcement of speed limits might be different.
Well, I'm gonna. It would be nice, just as a public comment, it would be really awesome if we had some more uniformity when you make a lane reduction like that on Bradley, if you could carry over to Champaign. I'm just going to make a public comment.
Any other comments on the bikes on sidewalks? Any other ideas?
We appreciate your input on, I'll get back to you on the accident data and taking into consideration what you guys recommend.
Okay, thanks. Okay, and lastly, we have a presentation from Cynthia on bicycle infrastructure in Germany and Amsterdam.
This will be the fun part of the meeting. I got to spend 2 weeks in Germany and Amsterdam and spent a lot of my time bicycling and taking pictures. And I wanted to share some of what I saw and learned there. I was last in Amsterdam in 1975 and Hamburg, Germany in 1986, and they have changed a lot in terms of bicycling during that time period. This shows you the cities included. I also visited, I think they say Bremen, Germany. I had never been there. It was quite a delight.
Wait, Cynthia, what are the populations of those cities, out of curiosity? Do you have any idea, or is that?
I did not bring that information. Okay. Hamburg and Amsterdam are big metro areas. Bremen is an old city. It's a smaller city, but I did not look up the populations of the cities. So just by way of background, in Europe they were implementing in the 1960s the American model of autocentric roadway planning. And between 1960 and 1970, the number of cars quadrupled, and it had quite a negative effect on roadway safety and fatality rates. You can see in this graph what happened there. And people became upset about this. So they protested, and some of you have seen information on this previously. There was a people's uprising in the early 70s and a lot of protests, and this is all out of a report that I pulled up online. Oh, I should have referenced that here, but it's the Plan Amsterdam that I have there. And there are additional pictures of the protests, streets full of people protesting. And it's very interesting to look at their progression in terms of their planning over the last 40 years for how to change that. And it has been evolving, but I didn't have time to go through that with you tonight. So I just went straight to today and how many people are bicycling and how much they're bicycling now. And the average number of bike rides is 665,000 per day. That's 36% of all of their trips are made by bicycle. And in city center, where I spent most of the time while I was there, that's 50% of the trips. And it's their fastest growing mode of transportation. So they have been, one of the reasons why they are doing this is because they have a lot of density in the city, and they simply don't have any other way to move people, and congestion is a problem, and even transit. And San Francisco has similar problems. They simply cannot accommodate the projected growth in people and trips by expanding transit. they know they have to shift people to bikes, and that's what they're doing in Amsterdam. So their transportation is very multimodal now, and bikes are the primary mode that's in their hierarchy. And they had these 3 objectives in their current plan that I saw, and I'm going to talk about those a little bit more. And what they have now, as you see, is this network of these separated red cycle lanes, which we used a lot. And I highlighted some key things here out of the plan, which I thought was important, that what they're planning to do is replace the principal networks and give bicycles precedence over cars on a lot of streets. And then some streets they will have cars and ban bikes. In other words, they simply do not think they can facilitate the growth in bicycling by widening bike lanes and bike paths. They just don't have enough space. So they're going to go to having roadways that are dedicated primarily to bicycling. Cars can use them because you have to be able to get to some destinations by vehicle. And then they finally, it was very interesting, they said that they're looking for creative answers for design solutions. So they're at this moment working on ways to design those cycling streets. And it'll be interesting to see what the designs come up with. And in some places, of course, they have very narrow old streets. We have some narrow streets here as well. They're not as narrow. The buildings are not as generally as close to the curb in most of our community as they are in these old European cities. So they also articulated why they're doing this, which I thought was interesting, and they talked about how it's part of health, that cyclists are healthier, more productive, and ill less often. It helps with their air quality. They take relatively little space, and they felt like it's essential for their economic growth as well, especially in the development of the new residential areas. And I did get to tour a number of new residential areas. I wish I had time to show you. They have housing where the new housing is on water, and it's attached to big poles, and so it goes up and down with changes in water levels. So they have hundreds of years of dealing with water and reclaiming space from water, and so I think they're probably much more equipped for rising sea levels across the country than we are. They also talk about how they're having more and more bicycles and bicycle-like vehicles. There were some very interesting things. One of the things I will tell you is that motorcycles and scooters were using the bike infrastructure. They're not legal there. If you want to talk about enforcement issues, it was hair-raising to have them scream by you in their bike infrastructure. That's something that they'll have to deal with. But there were also these teeny little cars, I can't remember if I put a picture of it in here or not, that are about as wide as 2 bicycles that people are driving down the bike paths. And so it was interesting. I saw more of that than you see of, for example, something like an enclosed bicycle or a quadruped bicycle. I didn't see any of those. So it creates conflict. Also differences in speed create conflict. That was a problem for us. We didn't know where we were going. As I talk about later, there are issues with wayfinding, and the people who live there are in a hurry, and you get in their way. And here we are talking about crowding. They have a lot of people trying to make their way through these narrow streets. And so we have grumpy roadway users. Also, parking, bike parking. I'll show you some more pictures of that. Even though there are thousands of places to park bikes, and I'll show you the utilization rate of some of the parking is mind-boggling. It was hard to find a place to legally park your bike, and this picture sort of shows you what was going on with that. So they're looking to improve smooth cycling, and what that meant to them is to allow people to keep moving along at an average speed that was considered reasonable and to be satisfied with the network, and to provide connections that overcome obstacles. And they're doing a green network. That's something that we've got in our plans here that we would like to see happen, and to create more space on the busiest cycle routes. This was a newer neighborhood that we bicycled through, and they build the neighborhoods with this integrated in. This is what bike parking looks like in places like the train station,
That-
and this is only one of the lots.
Cynthia,
They-
that thin road through that's actually new infrastructure?
Well, yeah, this is a newer neighborhood. This was basically a pedestrian street. You know, there were occasionally vehicles on it, but it's very clear that the bikes and the pedestrians is their space, and you can tell by the design of it. Of course, you know, the bigger streets are designed differently, but this is a residential area, and so that was designed with that in mind. So look at these capacities. Their goal is to get a maximum occupancy of 85%. It's currently 90% in their hot spots. And in terms of their peak periods, look at that. It's 195%. It was amazing. So this is something that, as you become a cycling city, we have to grapple with. You know, we've spent years building parking for cars, but we have not done the same with bicycling. So as we move forward, that's something that we need to think about is in our bike parking ordinances, upping the amount of bike parking that we ask for in new development and better location of it, I think is something we'll have to take a look at. Better biking and what that meant. They also would like for bicyclists to be responsible and exhibit good behavior. So this is not an uncommon theme. And it says in the areas where they have less use of bicycling, they want to see more, and they would like to increase it from 27% of their traffic movements to 35%. So they have areas where people don't bicycle as much that they're also targeting. This was the tour I did. I had a private guide who was connected with through a company I work with. And so you can see we got out into these outlying, more rural, lower density suburban neighborhoods, and I got to go through a lot of different types of infrastructure, which I wanted to show you pictures of. This is their bike ped bridge. It's about a 536-foot bridge over the canal, and it's pedestrians, pardon? Yeah, and it's just for pedestrians and bicyclists. This is their central station. This is what, when you walk out, this is a brand new building, which, by the way, took longer and cost millions more than anticipated. There's another slide later. I'll talk a little bit more about why that was the case. But this is the main level. Over here are ferries. Over here is the rail station. And the main road outside of this is the bike road. And when we got there around 5 o'clock, there was a rush hour of bikes going through here. They have bike signals all over the place. They're at almost every intersection, and they're easy to see and easy to use. I also, you see this everywhere. It's a very simple, low-cost solution on stairways. We don't have too many stairways around here, but there's just a rail that you can roll your bike up and down. This is a newer suburban street. You can see how it's designed. A lot of space is being taken up by and I actually don't know why there's so much space here. I didn't have time to ask that question. In urban streets, you can see how much more density there is here and how many more people. And this is just one of those things that's a lot of fun. When they redid the Rijksmuseum, which is their big, it's, you know, where all their old Dutch master paintings are, and they redid it, and they were going to close this pass-through for bicyclists, and apparently there was quite an uproar about that, and so there was a resolution. And but the thing is, as a pedestrian, you better look before you cross. When we biked in, I posted a video of this. There's a band that stands there daily and plays, and they were very good. It was just very enchanting you were biking through listening to this lovely music. More bike parking pictures. This just shows you what it's like when you succeed in getting people to use bikes. This was a great story. So their new central station, in order to get the trains in at the lower level, they have to have a steady, not very steep incline. And the road and the cars are even below. They're on the bottom of the station, and so they lowered this road. And this is where it used to be, and this is where it is now. So they had to keep lowering it and then it goes under the canal and to the station. And on each side there was a dead gas station, which did my heart a lot of good. And I liked that this one had been turned into a skateboard park. So I think this is the future.
Looks like University Avenue to me.
All we need is the trolley right down the middle there.
And there's gas stations that you could turn into skate parks. Just saying.
That's right. That's right. So when you get to the train station, the bike rental is in the train station, and out here, right, that's where that bike street is. So you can see that you just get on your bike and you bike out, and that's how it works. So some key observations is that it was the fastest and safest way to get around, and I talked about bike parking. Well, one thing I noted too in the past, when I lived there in the 80s, I lived in Europe, and even into the 90s, you didn't see people in wheelchairs. It was so inaccessible most places. And now, I think because they created accessibility by making these cities support bicycling, I saw a lot of people in wheelchairs. And I thought that was very interesting. So it's provided accessibility to a broad range of people. The other thing, everywhere I went, people were texting and talking on their phones and wearing earphones. Even in Germany, the most conformist country I have ever been in. And so I think that that's something that we are just going to have to acknowledge is going to have to be dealt with. Wayfinding, I felt like, was difficult there. I spent a lot of time being lost, and they do not have the kind of wayfinding. So for example, in Portland, I rarely got lost in Portland. Good American wayfinding systems are really good. So this is Hamburg. It's an old port city, and it had significant destruction during World War II. It was the main port for developing their fleet, and so it's got less old building, but it still has quite a bit of old building there. There was a lot of bicycling, but it did not have as connected of a network, so there were not as many people, and there weren't as wide a range of people. There weren't as many kids in boxes and things like that. They had a lot of the two-stage left turns there, but I was a little bit baffled by them because they were so tight. And I wasn't quite sure how that worked during rush hours. They did have bike boxes. I have some pictures in here. A lot more people are wearing helmets there. I would say out of the thousands of cyclists I saw in Amsterdam, I saw maybe 6 bike helmets. But there was a higher percentage of people wearing them in Germany. And it was there are very few Americans. There was mostly Germans and other Europeans. So the people I was seeing are people who, Americans tend to be a little more clueless about how to get around than Europeans in terms of bicycling, because they do it in their countries pretty often. So these are bike boxes, and a lot of the bicycling infrastructure they are refitting streets. This is clearly a street that's being refitted. They had overbuilt the streets in their city too, and Hamburg still has a ways to go, and they've got a lot of pretty high speed wide roadways that they're going to be refitting, I would guess, into the future. But this is the kind of new development they are doing. There's a huge area being developed down by the port, and thousands of units and millions of square feet, and it's being designed with bikes being a priority in the system. There are bike signals at nearly every intersection. I didn't master the art of riding up and holding onto the pole and never touching the ground. I'd have to be there a little longer and know where I'm going, but that is routine there. But they were retrofitting even tight spaces, and you saw some infrastructure like what you see in a lot of American cities. But they are more integrated into the transportation system. People roll them onto the trains and subways, and they walk them out the door and get on them and ride off. Bremen was a little different. It was not bombed heavily, and it's a really old city. And they are heavily used, but the medieval part of the city, their streets are so narrow you can't bike there, and also cobbled. And I don't know how many of you have ridden your bikes on cobbles, but it's not very much fun. But there was an extensive trail system. I'm going to talk about that a little bit. And I also love the art. Everywhere in this old city, you go around a corner and there's art. And it's a big part of the economy. And you all may remember the tale of the four musicians of Bremen. They are everywhere. The minute we walked out the train station there, we saw this young man with this shirt. He had Beijing to Paris, so we went up and talked to him. He's bicycling from Beijing to Paris. And that was a lot of fun. And as soon as you came out, you saw bicycle infrastructure. And everybody was bicycling. Another one of the rails, he was on, I believe it, I don't remember if he was on a bike or a skateboard going down that. These are what the old streets look like. Some of them are more narrow than this, and that's, of course, the tourist area. But there's this elevated roadway here between the city and I think the station, and they had utilized that area for bike parking for the station. I think there were hundreds of bikes parked there. But this trail system was fascinating. They told us there was 1,500 kilometers, and it connects a lot of northern cities, so you could go and bike for miles. And it was just gorgeous, and there were lots of people bicycling. The minority were the spandex guys on road bikes. A lot of sort of middle-aged people on regular bikes, but they were not lollygagging around. They were going places.
Cynthia, are those the trails that people will check their they'll walk, they'll hike on them, and then the backpack will be at their location when they arrive? Is that the kind of or is it?
I don't know whether they. I don't know whether they do that.
Did you see a lot of hikers?
I saw a few people that looked like they might have gear. Most of them sort of look like day excursions, and it involves beer drinking and going someplace and having a picnic. Or there was one family that I had trouble keeping up with. They had two little girls, and they were hustling along, and they went down. We passed them again later. They were swimming, so they were in a hurry to get to the water.
We need to finish. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Conclusions. Okay.
So these are just some of the conclusions I had. Having a comprehensive, connected network with separated infrastructure does dramatically change who is bicycling and how many people are bicycling. I talked about parking. I talked about the issue with texting. Yeah, reckless cycling is a major complaint, particularly in Amsterdam. There's apparently an ongoing complaint system about the bicyclists. So they did some research on it, and they found that really only 5% of the cyclists behaved in reckless fashion. They videotaped intersections. And I thought that was interesting because I think we have similar problems here, with the perception being that there's a lot more reckless bicycling than there actually is. Bike theft is a major problem, even with all those thousands of bicycles. I talked about the scooters and the motorcycles. I did not talk about the bike share. I think Amsterdam is in the process of throwing Lime Bike out of the city. It's a big problem there, because if they don't maintain the bikes, and the bikes aren't very good to start with, they literally end up with piles of dead bikes. And people do things like leave them in the middle of sidewalks and trails, and they're all over the place. So there are some management issues with these non-station or non-docking station bike share systems. Seattle has Lime Bikes, but they have a contract with them, and I know that's something that we're going to be dealing with.
But you can find loads of pictures of people just throwing the Lime Bikes over overpasses and fenced areas in Seattle. So,
There were a lot of people using Lime bikes in Amsterdam. I will say there were a lot of people on them. They looked too small for me. I don't think I
good to
could have
hear.
gotten the seat up high enough to use one, but there were a lot of people using them. It's all phone app. It's all done through a phone app. So I'll answer any other questions, although I know it's 9 o'clock. Yes, Jeff.
Can you speak a little bit to why the folks in Amsterdam didn't wear helmets? Is it a culture thing, or they are opposed to them, or they just think it's a waste of time?
Well, there is a law. I think children under 8 have to wear a helmet, so the children have helmets on. And, you know, I think the problem with helmets is that they're a hassle. If you're bicycling everywhere, what do you do with your helmet? You're going in and out and up and down. And if you look at the roadway traffic fatality data, you know, they have much lower rates of fatal crashes than we do. And I was sitting at a corner at the end of my day with my tour. There was no traffic control whatsoever, and it was just a giant, it was a small intersection, but it was just a giant number of people and bikes and occasional cars and trucks and taxis. And I was astonished that through all of that, no one even fell over on their bike. I found that really surprising. You know, I didn't expect anyone to get run over, but I would have thought someone might have fallen over trying to avoid the clueless tourists who were constantly stepping into the bike path. So, you know, they do start at bike education at an early age there, and people are very competent on the bikes. And so I think they have just a lower crash rate. And in terms of, you know, assessing risk, the truth of the matter is that there are many more traumatic head injuries in car crashes than there are on bikes. So if we really wanted to reduce traumatic head injuries, we tell people to wear helmets when they're driving. And in this country, many more people have traumatic brain injuries in cars than on bikes. So it's really a matter of risk assessment. I didn't wear one while I was there. I had my helmet with me. I wore it all the time while I was in Germany. But wearing it in Amsterdam, I would have, you know, it would have been a neon sign that I was clueless. And I was already on a rental bike, which was a big enough neon sign. And so, you know, I didn't wear my helmet. I will say I missed my mirror, and I nearly got run over by a Dutch cyclist at one point because when I got ready to turn, I didn't look as much as I would. I normally look at my mirror, and suddenly heard a lot of probably Dutch curse words behind me as she tried to stop and swerve to avoid me. Of course, she was going around me at a high speed with no warning, but so I think it's just I think it's a matter of risk assessment and dealing with helmets. They've got all those bikes. Imagine if they were trying to deal with helmets. You know, I was thinking about that, and there'd be helmets all over the place.
Styrofoam everywhere.
Yeah, so it's very interesting. You know, I'm happy to wear a helmet, and I wear a helmet all the time. But
I think, Jeff, there's a lot to the lower crash rate, and there's also laws that protect cyclists that we do not have here.
Yeah.
A lot of laws that protect cyclists.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
I assume you're available to go on tour for people that have
that would like to pay me
they
to
have
go on
bicycle
tour?
groups or professional organizations that want people to, need a program for or something. You're probably available.
Yes, if they would like to hire me to go along as their personal guide, I could do that.
Okay.
All right.
So we just have a couple other things to finish up. Announcements. The only one I know of is Kickapoo Rail Trails opening a week from
Yay.
Friday, August 25th, at 5:30. There's ribbon cutting to be in St. Joe on Main Street. Anyone else?
I also wanted to mention something KRT related. On Thursday, September 7th, there's going to be a public meeting through a study that the Park District, the City of Urbana, and CCFPD are putting on, and it's a connectivity study, kind of where the Kickapoo Rail Trail ends and how is it going to pull into Urbana. So the Park District is involved because of Weaver Park, which is close proximity, but there's not a safe way to get there right now. And I just wanted to mention it tonight because by the time we have our next BPAC meeting, it'll already be passed, but there will be more information coming around on that.
So you'll email all of us the date and time?
Yeah, and since RPC is doing the study and the three of us are involved, I'm sure that you'll get it through a lot of avenues.
I've got an announcement. Well, two really super duper quick ones. One, August 27th is Quad Day. Whoa! go. Which, I guess if you haven't been to it before, you should try it once. There's a marching band, whatever. But afterwards, there will be a catered event on campus. So if you want, as a community member, want to go and meet other people in the university community and new students who are interested in sustainability issues. I know campus will actually be doing a lot of things featuring active transportation this year, and a lot of the students want to be more involved. So after Quad Day at Illini Grove, from 2 to 6, there will be food and a great opportunity to meet more people who are interested in sustainability and transportation issues. And then second thing, September 26th, 4 to 7 p.m. is Light the Night. We give out a lot of bike lights on campus. And you should all volunteer. Thanks.
I have a couple more quick things on the KRT. August 17th, so in a couple days, we're going to have kind of like a preliminary bike ride on the trail to check it out, see if there's any last-minute things people need to do or things that people should know in general before they take their kids out or before they ride at night. So if you want to do that, or if you know somebody who would be good, we're looking at people involved in the bike community or bike owners, bike shop owners, things like that. Send me an email and I'll send them the link to sign up. And then on the grand opening, I got word that they're going to let people ride out to St. Joseph. Starting at 4:30, people will meet at Weaver Park and head out there.
Very good. And then also on August 26th, I guess, is See You Across the Prairie, a big bike ride for Prairie Cycle Club, that one. Anything else? Okay. Future topics. Anyone have something to list for that?
Well, I found, but I didn't get a chance to get pictures of it, but I have a survey map that used the survey from 2003 to 2006. So it might be worth 5 or 10 minutes just looking over what the issues were then.
Okay. Look at old.
Figure out how to make it shareable.
Do we want to visit the pedestrian beg buttons in downtown Urbana? Is that of any interest to anybody? Pedestrians crossing in downtown Urbana. Do we want to bring that up or talk about that or see if there's been any progress?
I just noticed, just in a quick research, that a lot of pedestrian topics, including things such as the principal of the Urbana Middle School requesting extra pedestrian-friendly facilities, things on Washington and Vine, some of our favorite streets, they come before the Traffic Commission, which we aren't notified of, that this is an issue that's come before the Traffic Commission. So I think I would suggest that we research the agendas and minutes of the Traffic Commission for the last couple years. We missed and were not notified about the University Avenue speed limit discussion at the Traffic Commission, which I'm really pretty upset because I was involved in the 2010 study. I put in my comments, if you take your eyes off the ball for 1 second, you lose it. So I think we need to maybe put on there as a topic, what kind of input should we be making to the Traffic Commission?
How often do they meet?
Less than monthly.
Monthly as needed, I think.
Because maybe we can just review the agenda.
Well, April 2017 had pedestrian discussions of special needs for pedestrians, which were turned down. So,
Wow, that's intense.
That, I think, raises perhaps an issue for discussion. People have told me that they would like to know what is on our agenda. And I think Kuwatz has an email list that people can put themselves on to receive agendas for meetings. And so I'd like to talk about whether we could do something similar so that when it's sent out to us, it could just go out to the people who have asked to receive copies of the agenda. And maybe we could set something similar up with the Traffic Commission.
Okay.
I think that those 3 things are very important. Maybe we should all discuss them next meeting, save them as future topics.
Right, that's what we're talking about,
Because-
future topics.
Oh.
I know, it's after 9.
Okay.
I needed what Lily said. I wasn't going there.
Well, requests are sent to the mayor's office. If you want to be on a mailing list of any commission, you can ask the mayor, and then we'll put you on those commissions. So it's available to everybody. And all the agendas are posted on the website, so.
Right, but I think it's a little, the public, I have had people tell me they would like to receive it and they thought they had requested it. So I think the process of requesting getting it is perhaps not clear, and I think finding them is often unclear. For those of us who deal with this all the time, it's easy, but for other people, I think it's not as clear. And so, but trying to figure out how to be user-friendly and accessible, I think, is something we could have something on our website that say, if you would like to receive agendas monthly, click here, and it would take you to the site at the mayor's office to put that in, so that it's very easy.
Okay,
Yeah, I think it would be good. It would build cohesiveness in the city of Urbana to have the Traffic Commission and the Bike and Pedestrian Advisory Commission on the same page.
Integrated to some degree, yeah.
Okay, maybe we can kind of put that all on one topic, kind of procedural issues or something like that. Do we need a motion to adjourn?
I move we adjourn.
All in favor? We're adjourned.